Okay, so welcome, everybody. Welcome
Let's talk about
to
it.
Let's Talk About Race. I am Diane Wong, and I have my co-host with me
Let's talk
tonight,
about race.
Eric Saunders was glad to be here.
and we are happy to be able to have a
Let's talk
special guest
about
tonight,
race.
doing important work in the world, creating a Black art and creating Black literature, um, creating Black
Let's talk
themed
about
books
race.
for all children. All children need to read about Black uh, experience, Black fantasy, Black life. Um, so let me just introduce. I would like for you to meet Sundiata the TaleWeaver.
Hey, how
And
you doing, family? It's good to be on your show. I'm very, very pleased and honored to be in your presence. I love talking to you, and I'm glad that we've been able to reconnect after all these years. You know, I love your son, and that's my brother. So,
yeah, yeah. I've known Sundiata the TaleWeaver for years, really since elementary school days for him and for my son and my daughter and my son-in-law. I mean, we're like know one another from a long time back. Uh, and so, let me ask you, as I ask everybody that comes on the show, can you tell us how do you identify racially, ethnically?
okay, interesting question. So, I these days I believe that it's important for people to identify with a nationality. Living in the United States, where much stuff is concerning status and jurisdiction when you're dealing with law. So having a nationality is important as far as being recognized in the world. I identify personally as a Moorish American or Moor, to keep it simple. That's an older term that was used to describe people who are today called African Americans, Negroes, Blacks, Coloreds, and different things, whatever it is this decade. So, I was raised by a woman who was quote unquote pro black since before it was even fashionable, and she gave me a very Afrocentric name, my actual name, but and Sundiata is also my name too, but my first name that my mother gave me was dealing with Africa and a connection to where life began on the planet. She always taught me to see myself as a world citizen, as more so than a local bloke around the way. I was a dude around the way, but at the same time, she taught me to think a little bit more expansive. And my grandmother, who I'm looking at a picture of her right now, God bless Ozella, she used to say, "Be uh, in the world, but not of it." So when I think of myself, I don't really consider, race is something that we deal with because it's political and it deals with our actual physical beings here on this country, and on this planet. But our spiritual being is a lot more expansive and is not confined to any particular land or race. Where the human race is really, I really see, as race. I think that the color thing, like who was it? Was it W.E.B. Du Bois said that problem of the 20th century would be based on the color line.
Yeah, and the 21st century too, apparently.
Right, right. Until we figure it out. But it's a
Yeah.
good thing we have people like you to help us talk about these things and work it out. So I'm sorry, I don't want to be too long-winded about that, but yeah. So I'm a Moor.
Okay, that's interesting. You're the first person out of 150 people. We've had lots of people over the 3 years on the show, and you're the
Mhm.
first person who self-identified as a Moor. And
With that
so,
terminology specifically.
Yeah. So Pharaoh, you always uh that's why I really like for you to be on the show every single time, because what does that mean to you? What does it mean to be a Moor? Or who are the Moors?
The Moors were or Moor is a European description of the inhabitants of North Africa, particularly in relation to their conflict with the kingdoms of Iberia, or the Spanish kingdoms of Iberia specifically.
Berbers.
And so it's generally in reference to the kingdoms of Morocco, including the lesser kingdoms of Morocco like Fez and Sousse, which were later unified under the Almoravid Caliphate, as well as other places like the Sultanate of Tlemcen, the Sultanate of Tunis. Those were considered the Moorish kingdoms. Which
And
were
so
all places in North Africa.
those were kingdoms. And so Pharaoh, just for our so that we can know, you've studied the some of the other kingdoms that were African, right?
Sure. Though what's important to understand for historical sake, especially for what we're talking about here, is that African's a really expansive term because it's a massive continent. It's
Exactly.
like Indians and
Exactly.
Chinese people are both Asian, but it doesn't mean the cultures are inherently tied together intrinsically or interchangeable. And so that's very much the case with African cultures as well. So the Moorish kingdoms, as they're described, or Berber kingdoms, another way you could describe them. That's why I said interesting, and specifically in the use of the word Moor, right? Because we've had North African people on the show before, but
Right, right.
anyway, so I was saying there's obviously lots of relation and interaction between the kingdoms of North Africa and the kingdoms of West Africa during, like, through the trans-Saharan trade, which is particularly trading things like salt from North Africa and bringing that into West Africa and trading that for gold and vice versa, which is where a lot of the gold of the Muslim world came from, was particularly through trade through the Sahara Desert. And because of that, there were lots of what people of West African descent that were like in the Moorish kingdoms because of that. But it's also a very strong cultural existence and identity that is independent of other cultural identifications. Not Arabized, but not Arab, as in they spoke Arabic, but it's not because they were Arab people. They spoke Arabic because they were conquered by the Arab Caliphate, and not the same as West Africans, because it's its own ethnic group. Though there's lots of cultural interplay and relation between each other.
Now, if I would add on to that, which is, first of all, wow. Okay, I'm not surprised because I know your parents. I know your family. So, but anyway, I was when I'm asked about that, I used the word more because of a connection to a landmass when we're talking about ancient Amexem and Al Morocco and the connection between this land and the original, I won't say the original charter, but yeah, even Obama spoke about the charter that was given to this land to be a nation at one point. And being as how the Sultan of Morocco at one point had to do tribute to, the president or the leader of this land had to do tribute to the Sultan of Morocco at that time. I
Yes.
believe that I don't use that term to be actually specific. It's more like it's a call to a form of nationality, because if you look at anything else that has been used for us for the past, I don't know, 100 years, none of those things are really like Pharaoh spoke to. Even African American, that was a reach to who we are. But at the same time, that's over 50 something nations, who you're talking about in particular. And it is of one bloodline, but at the same time, when we're speaking nations, so then we get into the whole thing about, oh, well, reparations and all this. Well, people don't understand, how can you get reparations if you're not a nation? Because a nation can't pay reparations to people who call themselves something is not being recognized in any legal form as a nation. Like,
Or at
even
least it's a lot more difficult to.
it's a lot more difficult, even though it's correct. But it's like, you know, it's a different venue, and you can't get outside the law.
Yes, and that's very true about Morocco. If anyone has any Moroccan friends and you're American, drop that historical fact and you'll impress them that Morocco was the first country to recognize the United States as a country, and the King of Morocco is the first monarch to recognize the United States as an independent country. And there's a lot of, that's what I was saying about like interplay and relation between the Moorish kingdoms or the Berber kingdoms and West African kingdoms. One of my favorite examples of that, and particularly in relation to American history, is there was a West African prince who was a Muslim prince, like many West Africans were Muslim, named Ibrahim ibn Sori, who was captured, like a lot of people, and enslaved. And so he was enslaved and brought to the United States via the Triangle Trade. And he told his master that he was a prince, and he didn't believe him for a while. He could clearly tell, his master could clearly tell he was intelligent. He spoke a lot of languages, could write in a lot of languages. And so eventually he believed him and like took it up with the government because he could write in Arabic. That was one of the languages that he could speak and write in. And so the government decided to have conversation with the government of Morocco about this, because they thought that he must, and the word that they used was Moor, because that was still the common European word to describe North Africans in that time period. And so like, oh, clearly he's a Moor, he speaks Arabic, so we need to have like conversation with the King of Morocco about this. So they did, and he was able to send letters to the King of Morocco, and the King of Morocco decided that he was clearly unfit to be where he was, and that he would pay to have him freed and go back to his princedom of origin in Africa. And he had already been in the United States for a very long time at this point. He had married in the United States, had children, etc. And unfortunately, he was not given the opportunity to bring his entire family back with him. And so he was only able to go back to Africa. And he was already fairly old at that point, in middle age at that point. Anyway, that was kind of a tangent, but that is one of the things that made me think of the concept of the identity and the use of the word Moor in relation to African Americans and African history in the Americas.
We have a history that's that includes indigeneity. You know what I mean? And a lot of people don't talk about it, include it, and I think it's a political move, because if we don't know that we are tied to not only this land, but of course the motherland as well, because we are the original people of the planet Earth, then it's like we'll never try to claim anything. And it's interesting that Dr. Martin Luther King said something in a speech once. He said, people who are being held captive in their own land, or being, if you know, I don't know for the exact words, but it's kind of showed a consciousness to our connection to this land going back long before 1492. Interestingly, in 1492, that's the year when the Moors were defeated in Spain. That same year that so-called Christopher Columbus came over here.
That was the last defeat of the Emirate of Granada, which was the last holdout of the Moorish kingdoms in Iberia.
That's right. So anyway, I don't want to get all too deep into that, but go ahead. I want to hear what
this is great. I love it. So I can just listen, and like everybody else, just listen and learn. And so to me, the important thing about see, I call myself Black. It's it's very political. It's very political. I call myself Black, and I say Black way more often than I say African American, because it includes the African diaspora. It's Black people all over the world, and we're here at this time to be Black and to lead the world to the next phase. And it's so ironic to me, the way the universe is structured. So we take people, Black people, who have been cast out, put down, stolen, murdered, you know, done everything too, but and still we rise, as Maya Angelou said.
That's right.
Still we rise, and still we rise. And so we have become so strong, and so strong, not just physically, but emotionally, because we are emotional and we don't mind being emotional, and in every way. So, so the challenge now is, that's why the anti-Blackness is the challenge, and we all have it because we live in this white supremacist society.
Right.
All over the world, there's white supremacy. So tell us about your books. And that's why we're here. We want to talk about children's books written for children about Black themes, like all the things we were just talking about. Those are the themes that are in your books, so that you're bringing books to all children, not about slavery, not about oppression. And so how did you start on that path to not just being a, you know, fully Black person, even though you know, whatever, however we call ourselves,
I'm with you.
but your mother raised you to, and your grandmother raised you to be in this world, and fully in this world, but not of it. So how did you start on your journey to being the artist that you are, writing books, creating music, doing films, everything with Black themes? So how did that happen?
Great question. Okay, so my mother and my father were both artists. My mother's she can draw, and she you know, she's a very talented person. She taught me how to sew and knit and all that kind of stuff, crochet, you know, things that.
She illustrated some of your books too, right?
Yeah, she did. As a matter of fact, she illustrated the Tale of Mkeke, which was really my first book that we put out in 2014. And she also illustrated The Bag Lady, which is about to come out very, very soon. So but she's been an inspiration as far as art. She allowed me to be me. You know, I will say that I grew up reading comic books, and that kind of sparked my imagination.
You and Frank.
Yeah, that's right. Me and Frank, we used to talk comic books all day long, and you know, we got deep into it, and you know, I started to understand, or in between Stan Lee and Dr. Seuss, I started to feel like that you could create your own world, you know, and then when you did that, you could pass on the kinds of things that you were taught, the things that were passed on through you. So music, you know, I was a breakdancer back in the day. You know, I was in a crew called the B City Crew, and you might have known some of the individuals who rolled with me back then. Your son was not a breakdancer, but anyway, you know, I got into hip hop back then, and you know, they were into poetry, and I always wrote. My grandmother, my other grandmother, her name is Hattie Smith. She lives in Denver. She she would ask me to write poems for when somebody passed on at her church. And I would send them, you know, my mother would send them in the mail or whatever. And then I guess they read them. And so I started writing back then. And then, you know, I started writing music later on, and stories and film came later. I started teaching back in Boston in 1985 back in Roxbury at a place called Indie Prep. And there I was teaching history. And I was using a book by this guy. He was Jawanza Kunjufu, Lessons from History. And I was led to do that by a guy named Philip Harrington. But anyway, I started teaching them, and that's when I felt like between teaching and art, I could touch and, you know, minds, and not just get money, and you know, which is fine, but I wanted to be more of use on the planet while I was here. So I guess that's how I got involved, you know. And then
Kathy says hi. She's on, and Frank
hey,
Frank says Marvel all day.
Marvel all day. That's right.
Yeah, and Kathy put Roxbury, USA with a heart. So
Well, you know, she represents in the berry.
yeah, she's Roxbury right now. She's at the Y.
Yeah, right around the corner from where my sister owns her house.
Yeah. So tell us about so your first book that you decided to do was Mkeke, right?
Okay, it was the story that is called the Tale of Mkeke, and it was based on a story that I heard. It was ancient, well, you know, an old African folk tale. It was told in many different ways. I've seen different versions of it, but the story that I heard was kind of harsh, you know, and it's a strange story. I was working with a pre-K school, and we went and we heard a storytelling, and they told this tale, and I couldn't remember the name of the book. So when we got back, the kids kept saying, "Tell us that story, tell us that story." I couldn't remember the name of the book, so I just made it up. Right? And they liked my version so much that I kept telling it. And then I ended up making some music to go along with it. My mother liked it, so she said, well, why don't we put it out as an audio book? And we did that back in like 2008. My daughter was young, and I had her sing as the little girl in the audio story. Her name is Danielle Hendricks. And so she sang Mkeke, and I didn't make $1 zillion, but the story is known, and finally it came out as a book in 2014. So the next book I put out is this one right here that you see. That's Johnny Come Lately, and that just came out over the summer, and it's based about the spirit of selfishness on the planet. And I called it Johnny Come Lately because my grandfather's name was Johnny Smith. And he was totally different than this character that I'm talking about. But the character is just really, really selfish and wants everybody's things. And so, the people of the earth have to figure out a way to parlay this entity, who, as you can see, is you don't know who it is, but it's within us all.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. All of the things that we love and all the things that we totally dislike, they're all in all of us. And so, so your stories give a way, and for kids to have a way to see some of that, to see that. And so I haven't read it, but does it have a good ending? How does it end?
Well, it's interesting. Well, it's like so Johnny Come Lately, he goes around and he's in different types of situation, and you see that sign that says mine. He claims everybody's things, and so he'll come back and he say, you could have a shirt that your mom just knitted, or you could have a bat and ball ready to hit it. Johnny Come Lately will come and take a sign, put it on your shirt, bat and ball, and say mine, right? And so at the end of the story, the people of the earth decide to send Johnny away from the planet, and so he can figure it out.
Well, that's what happens when you need to figure it out. Kathy said that she spent several Kwanzas with the Harringtons.
Oh, really? Oh yeah, because that was their big thing. And you know what? That leads me into the he was the one who really stressed the 7 principles. Philip Harrington, he stressed the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. It wasn't really about the founder of Kwanzaa. It was about those principles that and one of the big ones was Kujichagulia. He used to make us do the song for the program, and they go through all 7 principles. So any child who went through that, they knew those principles. Kujichagulia was one of my favorite, with self-determination, to define ourselves, name ourselves, and speak for ourselves instead of being defined and spoken for by others.
And you say that's and Kathy says that was on Walden Street. She remembers. It was on Walden.
Yeah, well, see, they lived over near Walden. You know, I used to live in Walden Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Yeah,
That's where I spent some early years at.
yeah. So what's been the favorite thing for you coming out of your children's books, and what do you think all children gain by reading books by you and by Black authors?
Well, that's a great question. You know, me and Frank talked about this a few times. Imagery is at the base, I think, of our self-respect. You know, like a lot of the images that we see is what help us to formulate what we think is right or wrong, what we feel like we want to be, or what we think we can do or can't do. So when I was growing up, you know, they had a few original people, you know, darker melanated people in on television, in the movies, and you know, in comic books, but there weren't many, you know, and a lot of times you had to deal with stereotypical portrayals. You had to deal with you know, situations that weren't favorable, you know, even and you had a hero, but the hero got to be in the ghetto fighting the local drug dealer who, you know, slapping up the people on the block. And, you know, I'm like, you know, well, Superman didn't have to do that all the time. You know what I mean? How come Luke Cage got to only slap up bums? So, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, I felt like if I could be a part of giving them some characters or giving them some stories that they could relate to, just like I could, it will build a more positive self-image and then make better people in the end. Like Frank had a good point. He said that when we were growing up, we read other people's stories and watched their stories, and it didn't really matter about the race. We were watching it and we loved it because of the story. And our we weren't really catered to, but we may do. So somebody should cater to us, and it got to be us.
Yeah, right, right. That's right. You know what? Speaking of that, in in these recent years, I have started looking back on some of the cartoons, some of the characters, some of the things that the kids would plop down and watch like week after week after week, and they are such racist. They're so racist.
I'm
The
saying,
characters. It's and because everybody thought that was funny, nobody because we hadn't we're in further development than we were, and now we see this, we things like what was that crow? Whoever that crow was, it was just
oh,
so
Heckle and Jekyll.
heckle and Jekyll,
Yeah, Heckle and
and
Jekyll.
just just I mean, you don't find much in the cartoons that at the base of it was a racist portrayal of, and you could tell they were being Black because they would sound like what see, even though I know that's how deep the racism is,
Right.
I even know what it sounds like to be portrayed as racist Black, because we all know, because we all get this. We're not immune to the racist
You remember
understanding.
remember the old Tom and Jerry? It was supposed to have been a sister who was in the house, but they never showed her face. They just showed her legs, and she'd be like, Thomas! and
Yeah,
then she'd be coming
yeah,
down with some slippers on. And it's like,
yeah.
okay.
Right, I remember that, and that is the subliminal messages that
Mm,
build into, now when people think about a Black woman, in the base of there is that woman.
Yep.
Yeah. So what about some of your other characters? How did you build those characters? And what kind of what kind of system did you build them to believe in?
okay, well, I came up with certain characters based on, like, sometimes it was just something funny or a joke. Like I had a friend and we used to make jokes And one day I called him a Roach In Clothes, right? And he called me something. I said, "What? Shut up, you're Roach In Clothes." And we laughed about that. And then I made up a character called the Roach In Clothes. You know, I wrote the book, and it was the whole story is in rhyme. You know, so I did a audio book with the music and everything. And his character's kind of based on Rodney Dangerfield. Rodney Dangerfield was one of my favorite comedians of all times, you know what I'm saying? Because I felt like his humor was so snappy and his wit was on. And so, you know, the Roach In Clothes he's a roach. He lives in New York City, and he lives on top of this restaurant, and he got a friend who's a mouse who be bringing him, you know, food all the time. He brings him a lot of food. But one day, some thug breaks in and snatches up the carpet that he lives in. You know, he's a roach. He lives in the carpet. So somebody he snatched up the carpet, and he takes him to somewhere to this other place is real, you know, it's like a warehouse or whatever. And he meets another family of roaches, and they're broke. They have no food. They're all skinny, you know. So he got to figure out a way to get out of that situation. And he bumps into a rat on the block, and the rat's trying to, you know, get with him and tell him to get some cheese, and he got to go in the house and he fights a dude. So, you know, I come up with different little scenarios, you know, that I think a child might think is funny.
They might find, and you know what? It sounds like to me, it sounds like children's books, a hip hop kind of. It sounds like the kind of books that children would engage in, but also see themselves as writers to create characters and write books.
Well, there's a new book that I'm working on. I'm in a different Vortex Tales is my company that I deal with my mother, Annie Cooper, my sister, Princess Cooper Brown, also my queen, Sandra, and Danielle, my daughter. We all kind of work together with that. But I'm also working with another brother. His name is Asaph Uno, and we're writing books too. We wrote a book called Sloppy Joe, aka Slobicus, and it's dealing with teaching children the importance of being clean, uh, fighting viruses and diseases, things that the world is dealing with. And it's written in a sort of hip hop style too. He's trying to find his tablet because his room is a mess. He's lost all these people's things in his family and his friends. So they're all coming to him and telling him to give him their things back. And so his parents make him clean up, and he has to find his hip hop, but he can't find his hip hop tablet. Meanwhile, he's making up stuff. He's dealing with music while he's cleaning. And by the end of the whole thing, he's actually made a song himself. And his father kind of guides him into the inner voice and where music and where all creation really begins. And, you know, where you close your eyes and you hear that voice inside you, it talks to you and then comes out, you know.
That's so. Do you find that so you do readings also, right?
Yeah, I'm a griot.
Okay, so tell us about that. You have a lot of different aspects of your art, and what I'm hearing now, the storylines, you know, the roach in New York, you know, finding a skinny bunch of roaches. Those are the kinds of things that kids could relate to, and then see themselves as writers, because these are not, you know, Alice and Jack and Alice walking up the hill on the pasture, because there's nothing that one that 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 Black kids can relate to. So how does this relate to all kids? What do non-Black kids see in this? How do they feel themselves in this, or what do they learn from this?
You know, there was a song the KRS-One made once. It was called You Must Learn. And in that, I think it was that song, but he said something about am I supposed to listen Hear Jane Run, Hear Jack Walk, and a hardcore New York? You know what I mean? Um, things that things that don't relate to us, we can expand our minds and relate to. But our actual environments and the things that we deal with, I think, talk to us even louder. So children who are not of the same ethnic group all deal with certain elements. Like, for instance, bullying. I have a book that I wrote called Bigg-O the Bully, and it's dealing with the fact that bullying is real in the United States. That a lot of children feel victimized going to public school, at least before the COVID and virtual learning. But going to school, some of them were accosted because of their intellect. If they spoke proper, they were seen as not being, you ain't real or whatever. And then so anyway, I try to talk to themes that all children can relate to. Mkeke is about human trafficking, which I live in Atlanta now, and it's like one of the citadels of human trafficking. And I remember back in the 80s when the Atlanta child murders happened and those children were being abducted. So I felt like, children need to be made aware of certain things, not made scared, but aware. They say they catch more than you teach them. You know what I mean? So if they're into something that they enjoy and they can be entertained and as well as being educated, I think it'll sink in more than me telling them, yo, you better watch it out there, da 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 da, and making them scared, because that's not a reality. Fear is not a reality. That's just false evidence appearing real.
And it's bringing everything out, and it's making everything open, and just this is just life. And then we're going to tell the story, and it's funny, and I can relate to those stories. And I not only can I relate to those stories, I can see myself telling those stories and writing stories like that. Same as hip hop music. I mean, people could get into it and find in themselves hip hop. I think a lot of kids can find in themselves, and it's not just Black kids. I mean, this is about people and roaches and life. And
I got a question for you, Diane. You mentioned hip hop. In your opinion, your children listen to hip hop, and they listen to extensive hip hop, like real, original, classic styled hip hop. What is your opinion about the power of music and its influence over our culture?
Well, you see, I look at hip hop and I see, as I said, an art form that came, that was different, but it came out of the experience that Black people were having. And hip hop has changed and evolved over time, but it's authentic. So what do I think about the power of authenticity? And I think that hip hop it is American music. I mean, I think hip hop is American culture. So, and it's not only American. Well, it is American. It's American. It's Black American, but it's all over the world. So I think I see a lot of uh, perfect goodness of creating something new from your own experience and making it into something fabulous and making yourself wealthy on that. So I think all of these things, I would like to see the books that you're writing, that the kids can really feel into that and turn those into hip hop, the same kind of energy of hip hop. And yes, my kids did hip hop. Now I like some of it, and some of it I didn't. My favorite of all times was, I always loved NWA, because I just love the audacity of, F the police. And it was so strong. I loved it. That's still my favorite song.
Coming straight from the underground.
Yes.
Young brother got it bad because I'm brown.
Yeah. And see, the words there, that's like the Roach In Clothes. You know what I mean?
Right.
it's those are different words, but it's coming from this is who I am. And look at I look at Ice-T, I
Right.
look at now I can't remember his name, but he's he's one of my all of the whole group of NWA and what they well it wasn't Ice-T, but it was
You mean Ice Cube?
well Ice Cube, but also what
You
was
meant
it?
also Ice-T. Yeah, him being the OG.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was there. So and see one of the other things I appreciate really in Black culture, and I see it even I mean, if you go into hip hop and you go into some of hip hop, you're going to see, well, there's some things in Black culture, just because that there are authenticity and they're real and it's good. And I like to see people making money on real authenticity, but it also brings up some problem areas that for in the Black community, this whole relationship, the women, the men, and the sexism, it's big. But I mean, it's not just in the Black community, but it's strong. It's strong.
Yes, it
So
is.
so, but it's open and it's real and it's coming out. Things have to be available and open for you to look at it and say, okay, is this what we really want to do? It's like what you were saying about the books that you write, and now you're taking a different tack because you want to because you want to express something different. So to
Right.
me, hip hop is an expression, a strong expression coming out of the Black community. And it shows the depth of it, the good things. But see, I have a hard time with good and bad as concepts
Yeah,
because
me too.
that's all they are, just concepts.
Yes.
We're just making them up. And what are we basing them on? Everything is based on white supremacy. So I really hesitate to say this is good and that's bad. But you see, white supremacy is steeped in sexism. It's steep. That's all. White supremacy is all about the patriarchy. So so
Yes, it
we
is.
have so we've gotten a lot of things out of white supremacy. Some of them are I don't know what's good about it, but we made some money out of it. That's what I see. I
If
like
I,
to see hip hop spread all over the world. I don't like to hear when I walk down the street and there's somebody playing music so loud, or when I'm driving, I have to roll my windows up. I don't really like that, but when I look and I see that they're white, I say, okay, good.
they're booming and they're booming and they're booming and
Let
they
them boom, let them boom, let them buy into hip hop because that's the way it should be. We're moving to black, um, but see, black domination is going to be different from white domination. Black is not going to be black on top and white on the bottom. Black domination is going to be ho- real and it's going to be balanced and it's going to be equal and it's going to be even. And that's
Domination's an interesting choice of words.
black domination.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's
Well, see,
interesting.
but it is. Look at this. Look at this. The reason we have to rid ourselves to our core and all of ourselves of anti-black racism, and this is for black people and Asian people and all of these other peoples as well as white people. The reason we have to do this is because we have to see and feel black leadership. So maybe domination is the wrong word. Maybe it's just plain black leadership. But black leadership is going to lead us out of the desert that
You
we're
know,
in.
dominance in these words, the scientific words that can be applied to genetics. I don't get into too much of that. I mean, I do, but I think our purpose as far as well, for me, uh, understanding is more so than pointing out things that are actual facts. What you saying is the truth. We got to get rid of that part. I did want to piggyback on something you said, going back to hip hop. I work with a group called the Right Track Program. I'm actually wearing a T-shirt right now. We are a group that deals with education and trying to reach out and uh, help students to be better educated through the culture of hip hop. You know, we deal with the different elements. We have a graffiti artist. We have, you know, MCs. We have the queen who rolls with us. She does a whole lot of the administration. Karen and Alan. He's actually going to be helping with music. But the point is, we're making a book too, and it's a hip hop workbook to sort of teach the culture of hip hop, the history of hip hop, tell a tale, and also push how the culture can infuse life as opposed to how it's been used, and you know, and to create death. It's interesting that you mentioned you know, certain groups, because it's like the way that we express ourselves through hip hop has always been real. The way that it's used can get devious depending on how, you know, who's behind and pulling the strings. When we're speaking about our pain, when we're speaking about what's going on, you know, sometimes it can come through skewed words. Then other people can take those words and put it this way and put it back in our community. And before you know it, we're dealing with situations in our own community that it almost seems like we created it, but we didn't if you get to the bottom of it. But it's almost like we're perpetuating certain things. So I feel like we have to be careful with our hip hop, with our imagery, our books. Everything that we do needs to be, like you said, moving in an upward momentum so that we can reach where we're supposed to be.
And that's right. And see, the whole thing though is that we have to bring out of ourselves what's in there. And so all of the hip hop, what I love about hip hop is it brought people things out of people. And once we bring it out and we can sing and we can rap it, then we can look at it and say, okay, is that what I really want to do? But until we bring it out, then it's just all stuck down inside of us. So I don't have a bad thing to say about hip hop, and I think it's made millions of millionaires. I'd like to see Black
Yes,
people doing well, and I like to see Black people who are doing well start to help each other and other Black people. And then the beauty about Black people is that we don't just want to help Black people, we want to help all people.
that's
Look at what
true.
happened when we had one Black president we had. Did he want to just help Black people? No, he wanted to be president of all the people. And so I'm convinced that Black people are the future, and we're going to see that, and we see it in hip hop, and now we're going to have books, hip hop books. I have a person I'm going to introduce you to, Lou Gittleman. He's like totally, he's into hip hop 100%. He's going to love. We're going to meet him on Saturday. So
Okay.
he's into hip hop, but he's also a teacher, and he's going to help us. He's going to help. He's going to help us. There are a lot of people. We're going to come together. We're going to help each other, and we're going to do it. So these books that you're writing, we've got to make it so successful that then you can spend all of your time writing books and bringing up kids
Right.
to write other kids to write books. They can see you writing these books, seeing you.
Yeah, well, you know, with your help, hopefully we'll make that a reality. If we can get it in some school systems, things like this is where, you know, these seeds can work, you know. Um, everybody has a role in. We got shows like yours. We got, you know, we used to be on this. We used to have a radio show too back in the '90s called the Panther Power Hour in Atlanta, and we ran for about 6 years. It was headed by Didon Skills, good friend of mine, and we talked about race about every week. We talked about political prisoners. We used to go to the prisons and actually do performances in there, and we had a lot of participation from the general public because it was Radio Free Georgia. So, you know, I really applaud what you're doing, and I want you, you know, I wish you much luck as, you know, continuing to do it.
Well,
It's very,
but
very
you're
important.
going to be. We're going to all be working together, and
Yeah,
that's the key. We're working together, and we're going to spread out. and we're going to collect other people, and pretty soon, we will have a real collaborative.
That's right. That's right. Well, I would love to. I'm gonna continue to look at this. I'm so impressed with Pharaoh. I mean, wow. You know what I mean? Every time I talk to you, Diane, it's like my mind is blown because I love that divine geometry that is taught in yoga, and I listen to Sadhguru a lot, and so a lot of stuff that you say rings bells, and they say like when it rings that bell and that black dot vibrates, all of a sudden you start to be able to see things past this veil that we're in.
Right. That's what we're doing. We're starting. Things are opening up. It's just the universe is pouring out a dispensation of awareness of our spiritual nature, that we're powerful beings.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're coming into that. We're like diving into this power.
Quantum leaping
into this power. And we're gonna, and there are a lot of people who want to quantum leap with us.
Yeah, I would like to. I lost my father a couple of years ago. His name was Delbert Smith, and my auntie Jean Wilburn. And while I had a chance, I just wanted to send some energy to them because I'm a spiritual person like yourself, and so I always believe they're with me. When I'm doing things like this. So, like you were talking about, Jean used to talk about the quantum leap that we were gonna do, and I look at where we are now and the energy that's coming down to the planet. We're getting a whole lot of photon beams that our makeup can actually snatch in and project our thoughts faster. I think that's why there's an attack, and the assault is getting a little bit tougher on us because some people know this. But if we knew this, that's it. Then it's a reality.
But we're coming together.
Yes.
And technology is really, look at technology. And now the beauty of the virus is that we do things virtual, and so we can bring people from all over the world. So we're going to take advantage of that. So we're at the end of our time. Is there anything that you would like to say, Sundiata? You've got the book over here in the title. There it is. That's how you can get it. You go to righttrack.arts.com.
That was how they can get in contact with me via the book. They can actually just look for Johnny Come Lately on Amazon.
Okay. Okay, so that's how you can get in touch with Sundiata, and we're going to hear more. We're getting ready to do some things,
Right.
because we'll decide the best way. I'd love to hear you do your book readings and talk more about being a griot.
Yeah, I would love to do that. And anytime. I'm glad that you're speaking to people of all walks and races, I guess, for lack of a better word, because
Yeah.
I think that everybody has to understand that part as being a big part of this cell that we're in. I mean, it's not independent of each other, and so no matter what the relationship is, it's still a relationship that exists. And so if we're gonna survive, we got to do things correct. First with self-love, and so you've shown that to me. I got mad love for the fam, and and for the collective. So I'll just keep doing what I can do on my end.
Okay, thank you. Farrell,
Thank
did
you.
you want to say goodbye?
Yeah, of course. I really enjoyed talking. You covered a lot of really cool topics, both in terms of history and in terms of literature. I enjoy writing, so it's definitely really interesting to hear, especially the process of coming up with characters. That's one of my favorites.
Are you a writer too?
I would say so. I'm not published like you are, but I enjoy writing.
That don't mean nothing. I love to read some stuff you got, man.
Okay.
Yeah, you would like his stories.
I bet.
Yeah.
If he's
Thank you,
anything
Frank.
like his
Frank,
people,
Frank, put your book, your Amazon.com,
see,
Johnny Come Lately.
I can't. I couldn't have ended this thing without bigging up my brothers, Frank, Sean, and Marshall, my sister Princess, and my sister Carol Smith. You know what I mean? Without Frank, I don't know what I'd do. He's a great individual. You raise great people on this planet. And big up to Kathy and Mark and Pharaoh and Asia, and of course yourself.
Thank you.